My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be John and Mother Goose, Video 26, Dream Nightmares. So here's my novella, John and Mother Goose, The Carnival of Tales. John and Mother Goose on the cover, surrounded by the fairy tale characters. Now, while driving his granddaughter home from daycare, John suddenly finds himself standing in the midway of the Carnival of Mother Goose fairy tales. He's greeted by Jack, of Jack and Jill fame, who tells John that Mother Goose is expecting him, as she has a role for him to play. But what does Mother Goose actually want? Why does she think John is a writer of detective stories? And why, when she meets John, does she greet him as almost a long-lost son? And for that matter, why do so many of the fairy tale characters have different stories they want John to write for them, instead of the ones in which they've lived for hundreds of years? John's not a mythical creature. He's only human, after all. But can he save the Mother Goose Carnival of Tales? Can he solve the mystery of the missing fairy tales? Well, we all have dreams. We all have nightmares. Sometimes we wake up when we're not sure which of these two forms of thought or motion we have been experiencing. Was it a dream or was it a nightmare? Hard to tell. There are 4 dream nightmares, all one word, dream-nightmares, in the mind of the main character as he makes his way through this strange adventure of the Mother Goose Carnival of Tales. So let's go to chapter 2, page 8, for the first one. Okay, here we are. So, nightmare as a fairy tale with fairy tale elements. My grandmother is a wolf. She has large teeth and she has glaring yellow eyes. She sits in a rocking chair and glares at me. 3 sections in each of these, so here's part 2. My grandmother asked me to come closer. She says she wishes to tell me a tale. I am leery of the large teeth and the yellow eyes. And now the third part. My grandmother tells me that I am not a foundling. I am not a baby lamb after all. She is my actual grandmother, and I, too, am a wolf. Is that a dream or a nightmare? Sometimes you're not sure. Okay, here's a second dream nightmare, which is in chapter 4, page 22. Again, 3 segments to it. We are walking in the woods, 2 babes completely lost. It is dark and we are cold. Our wicked stepmother has turned us out into the blustery snow. Okay, and then just want to make sure I have the second and the third here. Okay, here we are. A large woodsman appears on the trail. It is dark, but his axe blade gleams. He moves towards us rapidly, and we turn and flee. And then the third segment of the dream nightmare. The large woodsman catches us. He tells us that we are actually his children, that the wicked stepmother stole us away at birth. So is that a dream or a nightmare? Let's go on to chapter 6, page 40 for another one. Here we are. Again, 3 segments. Catastrophe has become my plight. I was slated to marry the prince. The king and queen had welcomed me. The whole kingdom had rejoiced. But then a cataclysm happened and all was woe. Okay, 2 more sections, and here they are. A little bird flew into the castle. It brought disturbing news that I was not a royal princess, that I was merely a pauper's child. My Prince Charming and I were forced to part. Now the third segment of the dream nightmare in the fairy tale mode. But then another little bird flew into the castle. This little bird also brought amazing news, that the prince was not a prince of the royal blood, that he was merely a pauper's child. The whole village is rejoicing, at the news. Well, again, the question could arise, is it a dream or is it a nightmare? And let's go to the last one, Chapter 8, page 57. Here we are. Yes, okay. The first segment is this. The princess lay in her casket. She'd been the recipient of a curse. A wicked witch had cursed her. The witch had cast a spell. The princess was made to sleep for 1,000 years. Okay, then we go to the second segment. A dream nightmare in the form of fairy tale elements. The prince lay in his casket. He had been the recipient of a curse. A wicked witch had cursed him. The witch had cast a spell. The prince was made to sleep for 1,000 years. Okay, and then let's go to the last one, the third installment of this particular dream nightmare. Today, the kingdom is rejoicing. The 2 curses have canceled out. The princess was cursed 1,000 years ago. The prince was cursed 1,000 years from today. The princess was cursed to sleep into the future. The prince was cursed to sleep into the past. Both prince and princess woke up from their curses today. So again, dream-nightmare, which is which? In the back of the novella, I included a number of fairy tales from the Mother Goose book of fairy tales, which I found on the internet. On page 90, there's quite a fascinating fairy tale. Ladybird, ladybird, fly away home. Your house is on fire. Your children will burn. That's it. That's the fairy tale. This particular verse has a very negative ending. Fairy tales were originally oral. Their origins are lost in the mists of time. From the time when they were first collected in the 19th century, there has been a controversy as to whether some of them are far too violent to be presented to young children. Some adults feel that the violence should be weeded out of these fairy tales, or that the violent ones should simply be suppressed. However, others feel that many modern parents try too hard to sanitize the stories that their children hear, and that the creators of the original fairy tales and the societies in which they were told and retold realize that life will be much less shocking for children as they grow up if they are made aware of some of the dangers, even some of the evils of life in an art form such as a fairy tale before they go out into the world. Almost in the way that a slight dose of a disease can inoculate a person against that disease itself. So in this novella, John finds himself in a world of fairy tales. He meets the fairy tale characters and watches their tales being acted on stage, and he hears about their dreams for the future. So it's interesting that at the deepest level of his mind, John thinks in the imagery of dream nightmares with fairy tale elements. So I suppose if we readers, were to ask ourselves what John, at the deepest level of his mind, considers what the outcome of this experience might be, we could ask ourselves not so much whether his dream nightmare fairy tales are violent or non-violent, but whether they have happy endings or unhappy endings. If we find that some have one kind of ending, happy, and some the other, unhappy, then I wonder if we could simply do the math in order to try to find out what John, at the deepest level of his mind, at the level of the language of imagery, of fairy tale imagery, is thinking. So how many happy endings in those 4 dream nightmare fairy tales, and how many unhappy endings? Maybe you could just add them up and subtract. So once again, this is my novella, John and Mother Goose, A Carnival of Tales. It's found on Amazon, where there's more information. It's found at roxmillspress.com, which is my publisher's website, where there's more information at my website, John Pasfield, all one word, johnpasfield.ca. There are 2 free books, the Planning Notebook, which I wrote while I planned and wrote the novella, and the Reflective Journal, which I wrote while I was polishing the novella. So if you're interested at all in any of the topics that such a story raises, then have a look. Lastly, I'll just say thank you for watching this video.